G'day everyone, welcome to Life in the Peloton, which is brought to you by Rapha, our proud partner. I'm Mitch Stocker, and we've got another great episode coming up for you this week, Chris Froome. But I want to quickly talk about the RCC because this is something that I just didn't quite understand until I guess about a year ago when I came back to Australia and I started working on the ground with Rapha here in Melbourne. Just understanding the RCC, the Rapha Cycling Club. To be honest with you, I didn't really know what the point was. Why would you sign up to this club? What were the benefits? Was it just about getting a free coffee or, some exclusive kit? But actually, it didn't take me long once I was down on the ground in Melbourne to understand how good this is, how cool this little community is, and how great it is for all the members who are part of it. Let's hear from one of the earlier members, David Murray, to hear why he loves being in the RCC. David Murray, I've got a question for you. What RCC member number are you?
Number 4648.
Now, tell me, because you know that off the top of your head, you're very beginning of the RCC. What's your experience of being a Rapha Cycling Club member, and why did you become a club member?
My experience, I suppose it revolves back to the Tour de France because I knew they were going to be looking after us on a tap to tour. I heard that they were going to give us massages and I thought, wow, after a hard stage, a massage would be great. But when I got there, there was people from all over the world and it was an international club and I made friends. Then I used to go back every year and I'd see the same people, but there was more and more people came every year and I got to meet people. And so I could go anywhere in the world and I would be with these guys. I'd just send them a message going, I'm going to be in your town, do you want to hook up for a ride? The RCC was it was an amazing experience to get that. Yeah, I've been a backpacker all my life. I've met people everywhere, but this was different. This was a cycling group and you all had the same thoughts. And it wasn't about the clothes, it was just about meeting people, and it was a great way to meet people.
Well, Chris Froome, you heard me say it just before. He's the guest this week on the podcast. Does he need an introduction? Well, if you don't know who he is, I don't know where you've been. I'll give him a quick introduction. 16 years as a pro, he's ridden 21 Grand Tours, and he's won 7 Grand Tours in total. 4 Tour de France's, 1 Giro, and 2 Vueltas. Born in Nairobi, Kenya, to British parents, and grew up there and South Africa before coming across to Europe to pursue his cycling career. I'm really not going to say much more than that because the podcast speaks for itself, and I think Chris speaks for himself. It was really an absolute honour to sit down with a legend of the sport, arguably the best Grand Tour rider ever. I think the best Grand Tour rider ever. What he's done in all the Grand Tours, not just the Tour, puts him right up there for me. Speaking about Grand Tours, one of the things that I struggled with in a Grand Tour was my gut health, actually. Because you're searching for that quick energy all the time, there's high sugar drinks, those gels in the race, but outside of the race, you're just eating a lot of white food, pasta, rice, simple food that you can digest quickly to get that energy. My gut was in a bit of a distress by the time it came to the 3rd week. Around the middle of my career, after listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, I was introduced to athletic greens. I started taking on the race, AG1, which was really easy for me to get my greens in the morning, and then I didn't have to worry about later in the day. Because as a pro, you don't really want to be eating a lot of raw foods in the middle of a Grand Tour. It just costs a little bit of extra energy to digest it. But you wouldn't believe it, we're trying to save in every part, every little bit of energy we can. So AG1 was perfect for me to get my greens in when I was on a Grand Tour. Simple, take a scoop in the morning, shake it up, bang, and I was ready to go. I'd walk down to breakfast and I was ready for the day, ready for the race. And it really did make a difference for me. Not only for my overall feeling, but especially for my gut health. I've actually kept that going since retiring as a pro, and it's something that I do every day in the morning. A scoop, shake it up, chuck a bit of ice in there, and I'm ready for the day to take on the day as well. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, the Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Go across to athleticgreens.com/lifeinthepeloton. That's athleticgreens.com/lifeinthepeloton. Guys, I can't recommend this highly enough. It really gives me that little boost at the start of the day and sets me up for a great day. Now, like I was saying, it was just such an honour to sit down with Chris one-on-one and in person. And the way that this happened was through a mutual friend of ours, Quadlock. They set it up for us in Melbourne. We went down because I wanted to do this one in person. I know you can access everyone online, but for me, podcasting is more than that. It's about the connection. And Chris Froome, I wanted to speak to him in person. Quadlock set this up for us. It's a company that I've been working with the last 6 months, and I've really enjoyed working with them. Not only the on-bike stuff, but it's everything else for me. The stuff in the car, the Quadlock on my bike, of course, on my pram, when I go running, it works everywhere. I've got my phone safely snapped away and ready to use whenever I need it. Not in my hand, not distracting me when I'm driving, and especially when I'm running, strapped on my arm, and I can listen to podcasts as I go along. Guys, this is a really, really good episode. Like I said, even better that I got to sit down and talk to him in person. So without further ado, I'm going to bring you Chris Froome. I hope you enjoy. All right, we're down here at the headquarters of Quadlock in Melbourne. Chris, you're an ambassador. How good is it to be in Melbourne to see where it all happens?
Yeah, amazing opportunity to get down here. It's obviously Quadlock's a product I've used for a number of years. I've always had the piss taken out of me for staring at my stem. And now that I can at least put my phone there, I've got an excuse. Just looking at my phone, not looking at the stem. But no, Quadlock's a product I genuinely believe in. I hate having crap kicking around in my pockets, and it's nice just to offload it, put it on the stem, and I think from a safety point of view as well, it's you're not having to reach back the whole time, and you've got everything right there in front of you, and clean and secure.
Well, Chris Froome, if you guys didn't know, is in his 16th year pro, 21 Grand Tours, 7 Grand Tour wins, 4 Tour de France's, 1 Giro, 2 Vueltas. I want to start at my favourite point of your career, I think, and I think in history, it's one of the best rides in history. I'm talking about stage 19, 2018 Giro. I was there. I was on the other end, so I got to feel the full wrath of what happened by trying to stay in the race. I'm going to run you through the situation so everyone knows what we're talking about. Simon Yates from the UK had been dominating the race, winning 2 stages and holding the leader's jersey from stage 5. It was a significant tour for Chris. Coming in as a favourite off winning the Tour and the Vuelta the year before, you also announced you wanted to attempt to complete the Giro Tour double. But you had a crash right before the race in the prologue warming up. I remember this in Israel. It was quite sketchy, and there was a tight corner where you went down. I remember someone said, Froomey went down on that corner. I was like, I almost did. And I was just rolling around. The race wasn't going well for you from the start. You lost some time in the early stages, but you won and took time back on, if not the hardest climb in Europe, arguably the hardest climb in Europe, I would say, the Zoncolan climb, Mont Zoncolan. But the following day, you almost seemingly cracked, it looks like, and you lost a bit of time back to the GC contenders, which was sort of unexpected after that victory. But coming into the Queen stage, stage 19, you were 4 minutes 50 down, which is sort of decent from Yates and the Maglia Rosa. Stage 19 was an absolute doozy of a stage. It was an absolute spectacle. The famous Col de Fenestra was in it. 185k stage, 5,200 metres of climbing, with, the Col de Fenestra, 18k alone, 9% average, and half of it was on gravel. Froomey, you got to take us to this day. Like I said, I was at the back just trying to make it through the stage because you were just going that quick, putting guys out of the time limit.
So I think, it was good that you painted the picture there, because you have to understand the full story to actually get in my mind as well and see where I was coming from, because I think as a team we earmarked that stage as, okay, we're going to really go for it and try and move me up the GC. Initial plan from the team was, okay, we're gonna ride hard all day, really isolate the other race leaders, Dumoulin and Yates, and on the final climb, I'll try and get some time on them. And I remember just chatting to my wife on the way to the start, just a few messages back and forth. And I don't know how it came up, but it was, why are you waiting to the last climb to basically really try and take time on them? And just made it is as if the penny dropped. It was like, hold on a second, we've got one of the longest, hardest climbs right in the middle of the race, but still 80 Ks to the finish. No one would be ready for a full-on assault at that point in the race. And I just started getting excited thinking about it. I was just like, this is it. This is game on.
You're nuts. Getting excited. Absolutely nuts.
And then I started. I went to, I think it was, I went to Nico Portal, the DS, flew past him, and I could see his eyes light up as well. I was just like, ooh, this is catching here. This is kind of, we're getting this going here.
Yeah, right.
And pretty quickly had a chat to the rest of the guys. And it's like, okay, we're going to do basically, I'm going to use all my teammates from the foot of the Finestra until about halfway up where we hit the gravel. Use all of them basically in that period, and basically just do like a lead out up the climb as if it was the final climb. Make it that hard that the race is just in bits from that point. And then the objective was to go solo, go alone, and hope that it was just enough chaos behind that they wouldn't be able to organize a good chase. It was crazy how things fell into place, because we thought, okay, it's a pretty bold move and it could go completely the other way, and I could just blow up and they'll catch me on the next climb, and I will have spent everything, and that's me. I'll probably race over from being 5 minutes down. I'll end up 10 minutes down, and even further back on GC.
Because the last climb was a really tough climb to the finish. Like you said, it was a climb you could have attacked on and got time. If you got caught at the foot of that, being out the front for the whole time, you risk just going straight out the back.
There was a lot of sort of dragging downhill to the foot of the last climb, and if there was a proper chase behind and they caught me at the bottom of that, I would have lost even more time, and that would have been it. But I was at this point where I'd won the Tour the year before, I'd won the Vuelta, kind of like, okay, now I'm going to really go for the Giro, try and win 3 in a row, which hasn't been done, I think, for a couple of decades. And I was just like, this is the only opportunity I can see left now. We're on stage 19 of the race, 2 days to go. It's the only opportunity left where I can try and pull this off. I was like, it's going to take something bold like this to make it happen. And I can just remember getting so excited going up the earlier slopes of the Finestra. And it was hard. I mean, my teammates were riding an uncomfortable pace, and I could just see the body language of other guys in the peloton. It's like, still 100 Ks to go. Like, why are these guys riding so hard? It makes no sense.
It becomes psychological as well, doesn't it? If that was on the last climb, people just hang in that bit longer. But were you getting a little bit nervous at the pace they were setting, or you were just so G'd up for it? Harder, boys, come on.
Yeah, I was really G'd up. I was loving it. Obviously, if you know what's coming, you know what to expect, and you can see other people like almost like scowling and frowning at you because like, oh, what are these guys doing? They're such idiots.
I was yelling from about 5k behind.
And one by one I could see Dumoulin's teammates dropping off, and every time one of his teammates dropped off, I'd almost be like, okay boys, a little bit harder, come on, let's go. Because I was thinking Yates was having a tough day. I could see he pulled off pretty early as well, so he was out of the picture, and it was like, this is great. Dumoulin's only down to 1 or 2 teammates left. What's going to happen now when I actually go for it and lift the pace even more? He's going to be alone, and it turned out he was. But there were a few things that I couldn't have calculated that day that fell in my favor. Stuff like, I think it was Reitenbach.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, sorry. He was riding for FDJ, I think, and he was there, and they wanted to keep him to pull on the flats and the other bits of because there were only, I think, 4 or 5 guys chasing me behind, so they wanted to keep him there to do the work. But then he was going pretty slowly on the downhill, so they kept on waiting for him on the downhill. So on the downhills, I was just going hell for leather. I could see the lead motorbike in front of me, and I was just trying to follow the lines of the motorbike, and I just going for it kind of thing. I can remember after each descent that I did, I'd come out another 45 seconds up, and I was just like, wow.
It was almost like free.
Yeah, so I started off, I'd be like, I managed to get a minute by the top of the Finestra or whatever it was, and then got down the descent, and it was like 1 minute 45. I was like, that's cool. And I was like, okay, I've got another 3-4 minutes I need to get. Let me just go into time trial zone basically and ride as hard as I can. And I kind of figured that behind they'd be playing a little bit of you chase, you pull, and I think that just worked in my favor. No one really had teammates there, and it was really so many things had to come together for it to work out, and it just happened to be my day, I guess.
It was just, and still the one, because it was, as I said, it was already an epic day. It was already an epic Giro. The Giro is typically epic, and that ride just capped everything off as it was going. Obviously, you had the Zoncolan victory there, but there was some questions. Froomey's a bit off this one, and it just got flipped, and you just flipped the cards right at that moment.
So, I mean, what was really happening with me was that crash in Jerusalem on the prologue course. There are some crashes that you get up from, it's just a bit of road rash. You kind of just shake it off and you get on with it. I don't know what it was with that crash. I was hurt. I just felt I couldn't pedal properly. I felt as if the pedal balance was completely off. Then my back started hurting, and I just wasn't right after that crash. And you were completely right in saying that first 10 days of the race, every time there was an opportunity to basically for the GC guys to fight it out, I was coming out second best. I was losing time. I was struggling to basically hold the pace. But after 2 weeks of racing, I think the body kind of mended itself somehow. I kind of started to feel more myself again in that last week. And then was that Zoncolan stage, which is mythical in cycling. I would definitely say it's one of the hardest climbs we would ever do.
Yeah.
I had a big target on that stage just because of, it's in the category of kind of Ventoux, Angliru, those big stages. That
Scary climb.
And I was like, right, I want to add that one to my Palmares. And I can remember attacking on that climb as well. I was far off GC. I was like over 5 minutes behind the leaders. And I was just amazed at how Yates came after me that day. I was just like, the guy's leading the race. I'm 5 minutes back. He doesn't need to chase me so hard. And I emptied the tank. I absolutely I gave it like 110%, that if you're riding a Grand Tour, you wouldn't normally go that deep on any one day, because you've got to recover for the next day and you think about tomorrow and the next day after that and whatever else. And that day, I didn't think about anything else. I literally just emptied the tank. But I couldn't believe that Yates was so hot on my heels. I think I had a gap of like 5 seconds for like 4 or 5K or something. It was literally like a drag race, the two of us, and he didn't give up right until the finish. So I managed to win that, but I went so deep that the next day I had nothing. And as you said, I lost about another minute the next day. But yeah.
I think they say that you're the best Grand Tour rider in our generation. I think arguably the best Grand Tour rider there is, because it's not just the Tour that you've won. It's the Vuelta. I've been in a lot of those Vueltas with you. It's this Giro we're talking about. It's the different dynamics. Help everyone understand the difference between Grand Tours, because it is difficult to understand. I've never ridden the Tour myself, so I can only assume what the Tour's like. I know the Giro, I know the Vuelta, but they're very different beasts. And you're someone who's conquered all three. And just what you spoke about then, about going up Zoncolan, you're not just thinking about this moment, this hill, you're thinking about tomorrow, the next climb,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. You've always got the bigger picture in the back of your mind. Of course, you've got to take it one day at a time. Definitely when you think of it as a 3-week race, it's pretty daunting. To think you've got to be racing at the front all the time for 3 weeks. But you really do have to compartmentalize things. And I know it's cliche, everyone says, I'm just taking it one day at a time. But really, in your mind, you do need to do that. But at the same time, you're remembering that it's a stage race. And for me anyway, I never really tried to go so deep and do so much damage that you can't back it up the next day, with the exception of Zoncolan or one or two special moments where you really have to pull it out of the bag and go for it.
And then the differences between the three, you really prefer, say, the Tour. I know everyone speaks about that's most known, but was there a favourite, or is there a favourite terrain-wise for you?
There was definitely a least favourite for me, and that was the Giro.
Yeah.
And it was why I never actually targeted the Giro up until 2018. And I think the only thing that got me to do the Giro was the fact that I'd won the Tour, the Vuelta, and then it was a one I'd never won. Potentially cost me the Tour de France in 2018, because I went to the Tour de France after the Giro and found out why not many people do the double. I just didn't have the legs in the Tour.
It was a particularly hard... you always want to say the one that you did, the last Tour you did, was the hardest Grand Tour, and I feel like that one just sticks out for me as a really hard edition.
It was rough. I don't know if it's because I grew up in Africa as well, but I've always struggled with colder climates, and the Giro has always been known to be a race where you get up above 2,000 meters in May in Italy. You're above the snow line a lot of the time. I'm also asthmatic, so I find the cold triggers my chest a lot. So it was the one I'd always tried to avoid, but one way or another, I was convinced to do it. And I think especially starting in Israel, I thought, okay, it's going to be a bit warmer at least for some of the race. And also the way the Giro is, there's a very subtle sort of nuance between the Grand Tours. The Giro is, it's a brutal race. They're all brutal. The Giro almost feels as if it's a bunch of classics all strung together. It's a bit more unexpected. Yeah, you can find these crazy attacks, guys attacking early on, or being raced a little bit like a classic style race. Whereas the Tour, for example, it's a bit more predictable. It's more controlled. You've got all the biggest teams, all the biggest names there. You're not going to sneak off the front as you could in potentially the Giro, for example.
I think that's the best description I've got of the Giro. It feels like that. Sometimes you've got, if anyone's interested in data, 450 TSS days. That's not because of, it's a combination. It's the length of this epic stage. It's the way they race it. And outside of the race, it's like a classic too. You're driving a million miles as well. So you mentioned growing up in Africa. I want to have a quick chat about that. Riding bikes in Kenya and growing up in Kenya. Help us understand what that was like.
For me, that was really, I guess, where my love for the bike started, and it had nothing to do with racing. It had a bit to do with speed. I just enjoyed being on my bike as a kid, and I think growing up 30 years ago back in Kenya, my parents weren't really worried about. I was a 5-6-year-old, and the only rule I really had from my parents was be back when it gets dark. That was all.
I was 6 years old,
and otherwise I had a little bike, and I could go where I wanted, go and meet who I wanted, go and see who I wanted. And
it's safe to do that there?
And it was safe back then. I'm not so sure kids could do that now. You'd let your 5-year-old out on the roads with cars this day and age. But that was how I grew up. And the bike for me was really just my independence. It was my way of getting around without asking mom or dad, please take me somewhere. Or I just loved spending time on my bike. I'd go and explore places that I'd never been before, go and find dirt trails and jumps and all kinds of things, and that's what cycling was to me. And then only really when I went to boarding school in South Africa as a teenager, and when I was down there, I was exposed to road cycling for the first time, and it was more of a sport down there. Every weekend there was another race, an event that you could, as a amateur cyclist, you could go and enter, and you basically ride the fastest time you can, over 100 kilometers. And it just became a weekly, that's what I'd do on weekends. I'd go and enter these things and take part, and found that I had a decent engine. I could keep up with guys who'd been doing it for a few years, and I was like, this is cool.
Well, tell me a bit about it, because I did hear also cycling was a nice little advantage being down at boarding school too, because you had a little side business, little side hustle going too. Tell me a bit about that.
I know who's told you that. Yeah, thanks, Imps. I think...
Because I think the reason why I want to say this is I think everyone assumes, and I probably assumed this before I really met you in the bunch, Chris is this robot. He just, looks at his computer, he sticks at his watch, and he just trains and goes home and sleeps. But you're a fun guy, and you're a bit of a crazy guy outside too. And I don't think a lot of people know this. And this story for me sort of sums it up.
So I think, being in the boarding house of a boarding school, it was opportunity for me to obviously get out of school grounds, and you know what guys are like. I mean, you're leaving. Do you think you can stop past the tobacco shop and get me a box of smokes? And there's a bottle store just around the corner. Can you get me a bottle of that? And I did. I would fill my bidons with things that looked like water but didn't taste like water. Shove boxes of cigarettes up my jersey or whatever. And of course put 100 100% commission on anything I got, and managed to buy my first racing bike with the proceeds of basically anything I kept the boarding house topped up with.
Brilliant. Tell me about going across to Europe, getting to Europe, and the challenges of that, because I actually spent a little bit of time in the CMC UCI team, and your name was quite famous there when I got there. It's a setup in Aigle in Switzerland to supporting countries that don't have a big federation to help guys come to Europe. I was lucky enough to get in there through a back door because the federation in Australia is quite good, but that's another story. Really cool setup and a really great opportunity. Tell me about that little pathway and that opportunity, how that all came about.
It was very... I was incredibly lucky, I guess, with my upbringing in Nairobi in Kenya. I'd always been born as a Brit. I knew my family was British. I was a British kid growing up in Africa. But when I started riding in Kenya had a very non-existent cycling scene, and the few cyclists who were there very quickly had the opportunity to represent Kenya if they were any good. That was a clear pathway for me. The UCI had this program where they would invite people from non-conventional cycling backgrounds into Switzerland, basically provide them with a continental team set up and get them into all the under 23 races that were basically would feed into the pro scene.
It was a great, it was like a pro setup. It was better than my first team. It
was amazing.
The equipment, Nike kit, Look bikes, Nike kits.
Yeah.
Living in Switzerland, it was like a little sort of boarding house set up in Switzerland.
Yeah, it was interesting.
It was cool.
Yeah.
And for me, it was really, at that point, as a sort of in my late teens, you can imagine I would have been sitting on the internet looking at all the continental teams out there, and I would have been sending them all my CV, which probably had nothing on it that they recognized. And I get very few replies, but the UCI did reach out to me and say, yeah, listen, if you want to get to Europe, this is an opportunity you can take. And I came over to Aigle. I think I spent about 6 months with them, and the very first stage race I did was Giro de Regione over in Italy. It went incredibly well for me. It was. I knew I had this opportunity coming up to go and race in Europe, and I just trained my heart out all through the winter. I guess when the Europeans were dodging bad weather, I was back in Africa just training up a storm. Arrived in March, I think, did this Giro de Regione, and first mountaintop finish, just rode away with Simon Spilak. Oh, wow.
He was sort of saying to me, oh, please don't drop me, please don't drop me. I thought, okay, I need friends here, so I didn't drop him. Kind of kept him with me to the finish, but then I followed the lead motorbike into the deviation around the last corner, and he got the win. Needless to say, 2 days later there was another mountaintop finish. I didn't wait for anyone. I just went on my own, and that I think that performance there got the attention of the Italian team owner, Claudio Corti of Barlow World, and doors opened for me to turn professional in 2008.
Well, tell me about, I don't know exactly when, I couldn't find your exact first professional win, but I know it didn't happen exactly how you wanted it to. That very first professional win, you came ever so close, didn't quite get there. What happened there?
Yeah, that was another. I feel as if this is almost the theme of my career, is I had to learn the hard way. And coming into I'd
was it with Barlow World or Cornica?
With Barlow World. Barlow World. I'd got into a breakaway of I think 3 or 4 guys. In the final 15k, I jumped away from the other guys, and I was coming in solo to the finish on my own, and the lead motorbike that was with me sort of saw that I was kind of, I guess, really under the pump. I was pushing towards the line, and the guy said, "Take it easy, you've got it. Don't worry, stop." Because I kept on saying to him, "What's the time gap? What's the time gap?" And he said, "No, take it easy. You've got it. I was like, great, okay, I've got it. I was rolling into the last few hundred meters, and I think I was going to sort of zip up my jersey, And as I did that, guys just came flying
Oh,
around
no.
me, for the sprint. And then I heard guys crashing as well, because I was in the middle of the road and the lead out and the peloton was coming either side of me, and then guys started crashing. I think Daryl went down.
Oh, gosh.
I got away with getting into big trouble with that one, because thankfully Robbie Hunter won the sprint, who was a teammate of mine on Barlow World. So it was still a team victory, and I could walk into the hotel not about to get blasted for messing it up. But joke was on me that day.
Well, you were out here with Barlow World. I actually didn't realise in the 2008 Herald Sun Tour I was in that race too. We went up Mount Buller. You had a great day on Mount Buller, and you pulled yourself back. You were second up Mount Buller, fourth overall. You probably don't remember. I couldn't even remember the stages. I was looking at it myself. I was like, where'd we go that tour? So
who won that day? Do you remember?
I did look at it. I forgot Nell.
Okay.
I think it was a breakaway.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. It was a breakaway, and you went away and
One from the Peloton.
Oh, okay. But following Barlow World, you caught the attention of Ron Ellingworth, and you went across the sky in 2010. But 2011 was a bit of a breakthrough year, but it wasn't looking like a breakthrough year from what I understand. I've only just been reading about this, that you came to the Vuelta, a bit of a late call-up, and even Brailsford, from what they were saying, they weren't even thinking about re-signing you. But you flipped it there because you ended up finishing second in that Vuelta, becoming sort of a GC guy. You came in there as support. And from what I understand, you must have gained some belief, like, I could actually be here. The team backed it as well. They went, we can't let this guy go. Brailsford flew out, made you so on the dotted line, and they locked you in.
So that was really, I guess, a turning point in my career. I mean, I'd been professional. That was my 4th year professional. And coming to the end of my contract at Team Sky, I'd had a few feelers out there and a few sort of, interest from other teams, but I didn't have anything solid at that point. And I missed out on the Tour de France selection. And when I missed out on the tour, I guess similar to coming over to Europe for the first time, I just sort of really knuckled down through that summer, went up to altitude, just stayed up there for best part of a month, and trained up in Livigno to get ready for the Vuelta. Wasn't even sure that I'd get a spot in the Vuelta team. I think I may have even missed the cut. And in the last week going into the Vuelta, one of the guys got sick. So I got the call up, and it was really like, wow, this is now my moment. I'm ready for this. I feel as if I've trained. I'm ready. They gave me the job of being Bradley Wiggins, basically help him out as far into the mountains as I could was my sort of job description in that race.
Okay.
It was really a sort of a light bulb moment for me, because I was riding with Bradley and riding in that sort of conservative way. I mean, he liked to ride at a very sort of steady speed, not jumping around, chasing attacks or anything, but almost like a time trialist, just ride within himself and be there on the climbs. And they gave me that job of, wherever Bradley goes, you go. You follow him, and when the race gets to that pointy end and he might need you to pull, that's when we want you to pull. I got into the mountains there, and it was one of the first mountaintop finishes in that race. I kind of waited around Bradley, stayed close to him, and turned around at one point, and there were less than 10 guys left in the peloton. And I remember them asking me, okay, Chris, now, come on, your turn to pull, mate. Set a steady tempo. And I can remember, okay, get on the front, started pulling, and a bit of crosswind up on a plateau. I pulled a little bit harder, turned around, and there's only like 3-4 guys left. And I was like, wow,
How's this happened?
I was just like, this is incredible. And I was like, hold on a second, if I can do this and there's only 4 guys left, why can't I be the guy like trying to hang it out and stick in there for GC as well? And it was really, I guess, where the first time in my career where I really started believing in myself as a contender.
Were you nervous coming into that when they said, look, you got to stick near Bradley, you got to get over these climbs? You think, I don't know if I can do that. Like, if the 10 guys going to be left, and this new, I guess almost new way of riding, which Sky sort of changed the way that, maybe it's changed now, but I think for a long period it was a new way and a revolutionary way of doing the Tour de France. Did that somehow, a bit of a light bulb, this suits me if we ride a controlled pace? Or?
So it definitely did suit me, but I think if I'm completely honest, in 2011 I had a lot of other stuff going on. I'd been battling with bilharzia, which is a African, well, not African, it's in Asia, it's in South America. It's a parasite that you get in the water out in Africa. You can get it just by touching contaminated water. And at the beginning of 2011, I'd gone in for some medical checks because I just thought something wasn't right. And I'd flown back to, I think it was Nairobi, and had some medical checks in Kenya. And being in Kenya, that's one of the things they naturally check for. And it came back that I had pretty high levels of this stuff in my body, and to indicate that it'd been there potentially for a few years. And it'd just been building up basically in my system. And it's a parasite that feeds on red blood cells and iron. And so as an endurance athlete, it's
the worst thing ever.
The worst thing you can imagine.
Wow.
And it sort of made sense why I kept on having going through these periods of, I'd build up for a few weeks, start feeling good, and I'd just get a little cold that would just stop me from progressing. I'd have to back off the training or whatever it was. And I found I just wasn't making progress through 2010, the earlier part of 2011, until I picked this up. I took the medication, which basically is just like, it just kills all the parasites. And I just suddenly felt, I guess I felt like I was doing training, and then I was feeling better. I'd do more training, I'd feel even better. I was like, wow, I'm actually making progress here. And then when I missed out on the tour and I just did that massive training block up at altitude, I managed to shift some weight as well. I lost about 2 kilos. I was about 2 kilos lighter than I'd ever been before. And I was like, wow, I can sustain. I didn't know I could get that light. I'd gone down from racing at sort of close to 70 kilos down to about 68. And I just found, once I got into that Vuelta and was given that job to help Bradley there in the mountains, this just feels so easy. It was, well, why didn't I figure this out before? Like, just need to lose a little bit of weight and to have been healthy. And
sounds simple, but yeah, of course.
Put a few months of training back to back without having any issues, and that was the result I got. So it really was, I guess, the light bulb moment for me in 2011, and really made me think from that Vuelta. After that Vuelta, it was, okay, I obviously need a new contract now. But I want to be in a team where I can target the Tour de France next year. Like, I've done this now in the Vuelta. I feel confident. I've got an engine to race with these guys. Now I want to be able to try and do it at the biggest race, at the Tour de France. And that was where, I guess, it led into the 2012 saga at the Tour de France between myself and Bradley Wiggins, because that was just my one condition to stay at Team Sky, was that I got an opportunity in that tour to race for myself, which I was promised at the time. But then when I got there, obviously Bradley, there was a time trial before we got to the mountains. Bradley went into the yellow jersey in the time trial. I was like, okay, mountains tomorrow, I'm going to have my shot now. But yeah.
It didn't happen like that.
No.
2012, you were second at the Tour de France, fourth at the Vuelta, 2013, first at the Tour, 2014, second at the Vuelta. I'm talking about the general classification here. 2015, first at the Tour de France, 2016, first at the Tour de France, second at the Vuelta, 2017, first at the Tour, first at the Vuelta. Did the Tour Vuelta double, the first person ever to do this since the Vuelta moved to the end of the year. And then you went on to win the Giro, which we spoke about at the start, and you got third at the Tour after that. Repeatability and managing expectations. This is something, as pro sportsmen, whatever level, there is some kind of expectation. Once you do something, you're expected to do that again and more. And repeatability. It's a hard thing to master. I can't even imagine at that kind of level what that is. You know, doing my job was enough for me, and that battle, everyone has it. Talk to me through about that, and about, I guess, the team that you build around you to help, you know, handle that, or to support you, because this is something that we can just see from those results. I'm missing a whole lot of other results that you just have to be able to perform, repeat that session, but also manage that expectation. Froomey, you've won the Tour 2 or 3 times. What's next? What are you going to do? And you just got to be able to do your job.
It's a tough one, because I think winning a race like the Tour de France, I mean, that it's a massive achievement just to be able to do everything to get to that point where you're even in contention to win the Tour. Once you've won the Tour de France, life changes for you. You try your hardest not to change yourself as a person. I mean, you don't feel any different. You're like, okay, I've just won a bike race. I'm still the same person. But everything around you changes. It's tough for a young young athlete. I mean, you're not trained to deal. You're trained to ride your bike. You're not trained to deal with everything else that comes your way in terms of media, commercial opportunities. Everyone wants a bit of you. And that can be quite a lifestyle change for a lot of people. And I think that's been a big reason why a lot of Tour de France winners will come out, win the Tour de France, and find it very difficult to back it up again the year after, because that focus that it takes to be able to take on a Tour de France and commitment, it can very easily get blurred, I guess, with all the other commitments that come with being a Tour de France winner. And I think one thing that the people around me, most notably, I think my wife, Michelle, she was incredibly good at keeping me grounded. I still had to do my own laundry and everything at home. I was not this Tour de France champion to her. I was just same old. And I think she kept me very grounded, kept me very on track with, done that now, straight on to the next thing. What's next? And that's almost how it felt for me for that whole period where I was winning, I guess, from 2011 all the way through to 2018 when I won the last Grand Tour. It was very much, okay, finish that Grand Tour, what's next? And it was not really living in the moment, not really enjoying the victories, I guess. That's what it takes if you want to keep going at it like that.
One thing that comes with success also comes the haters. You know, like, especially in Australia, we love the underdog. You know, it's easy to cheer for the underdog. And when you're on the top, you know, I can only imagine what it was like, because people just want to pick you apart. You know, look, even, you know, you've got the crowds, you've got people picking, you know, you can't descend, you can't ride cobbles. Then you've got guys like me, and you'll understand this too when you retire, people want you to be controversial, you know. And I went out on the limb and said, look, Froomey, he needs to retire, you know, because people are looking for you to say something different. I guess, how have you been able to sort of, one thing I've really admired about you was, if there's something broken or weak, you fix it. Whether it's descending, whether it's riding cobbles, I'll just attack on the cobbles. If people don't think I can ride cobbles, I'll just keep riding for more years to shut Mitch up, you know? I'll just descend. I'll invent a new way to descend that the UCI have to eventually ban because it's so fast. You're meticulous with your training. I know this because I've spoken to Daryl Impey about this. He said, I don't know if I can train with this guy anymore. It's just so hard, you know? It's just gets dials in. So this way about it, how's it been in this sort of washing machine of people who want to support you, but also going up a mountain with people yelling in your face stuff you don't want to hear?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly hasn't been easy over the years. There's been times, and I think, I mean, I don't like to talk about this that much, but it's that whole era of Lance Armstrong, I guess.
Yeah.
And the image that brought to cycling. Sure, there were other winners after the Tour de France between myself and Armstrong, but there was no one who was backing it up year after year after year. So when I started doing that again, everyone thought, right, here we go. This is Lance 2.0. Like and certainly the French were painting me in that way. The French commentators were. And so we were going out there on the roads of the Tour de France and getting serious abuse every day. I mean, we didn't actually even publicize it at the time because we didn't want to draw attention to it or turn it into a bigger deal than it was. But we were getting punched almost on a daily basis on the bikes, getting spat at, getting urine thrown at us. One day in particular, I did say something. Actually, it was clearly urine. Someone we were coming along. And you could see this guy. I could see this guy sort of edging into the road and smiling, ready. And this guy had a different look about him. Yeah. And as we got there, he threw this kind of cup at us, and it actually hit most of my shoulder and hit Luke Rowe in the face.
Oh, and he would have lost it.
And you could smell it. It wasn't beer. It was urine. And I was like, okay, I got to finish that day. I was like, listen, guys, this is this is sport. Come on, this is not on. This is too much. Yeah, I would get punched in the ribs quite often. Teammates would do their jobs, pull off. They'd get punched riding slowly up to the finish. Get abused by fans. It was pretty rough. But at the same time, what can you do? I mean, you're like you're trying to race to the best of your ability. You can't prove a negative and be like, listen, I invite all of you to come to my house and see that I'm not doing anything dodgy. Just got to trust the process at the end of the day. Like, I think personally, I feel like the huge turnaround in the sport, and maybe you can confirm this as well, is when they brought in the biological passport. And I think that and the Adams system, where we literally have to check in every single day of our lives where we are and where we can be tested every single day. I think that was a huge turning point in the image of the sport. And I've certainly found these last years, last 3-4 years, that it's becoming less and less of an issue in our sport in terms of the image and the perception from the public. So I think things are moving in the right direction. It's taken a good decade to kind of get through that point. But it hasn't been easy at times, and that's when I guess leaning on a good support structure around you really helps. Good teammates, you all. Sometimes as a team, it really brought us closer together, because it really makes you feel like, right, we're all under attack here from all sides. We're just going to stick it to them, and it kind of makes the bond between you even better. I mean, I can remember I think it was the 2017 or 18 Tour de France start, standing on the presentation in front of a predominantly French crowd at the presentation of the Tour de France. Day one, it's normally really exciting. It's a great feeling, great atmosphere to be there with so many people. We stood there and we had a few thousand people booing at us, and sort of whistling in a disrespectful way. That it's a French thing. They whistle when they don't like people. And
what's in store for us this tour? This is how we're starting.
We all just stood there, I guess, with big smiles on our faces and just like, right, boys, this is it, us against them, kind of thing. And it's it's not easy at times. And 3 weeks of it does get a lot. But at the end of the day, you just got to kind of just go back to focusing on the process of, okay, right, just got to go through the motions of everything that you do normally, and just try and just block everything else out.
So many young guys, and even not even young guys. I know a lot of people who are just general cyclists, but a lot of young riders and guys in the Peloton are inspired by what you do. Look up to you, the way what you just spoke about, that you're a leader through all that controversy, but also the way you ride. Who inspires you? Who are you in awe of?
Yeah, I mean, I find that question really hard to answer, because I've never really had massive sporting idols. When I was a teenager, I looked up to one or two of the current professionals at that time. They went down for doping a few years later, and I kind of, after that, I almost stopped looking up to people. I was just like, right, I'm just going to do this my way, do the best I can do, and I'm not really going to look up to people that much.
What about in the Peloton now? Like, there's guys that I am actually in awe of when I'm racing them, and you're in the same race and they're doing something, you're just like, that's just like being in a race with you. And like I said, the Finestra stage, as much as I hated that because I almost got eliminated, I just could not believe what you did. So, because you're at the same fatigue, and we're just human beings. We're like, I know, like, how could this guy be that much better? This is insane. It was just insane. So that sort of like, that feeling.
No, cheers, mate. Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Coming from another pro, it's pretty cool hearing that sometimes. But yeah, I mean, certainly these last few years, I've had a lot of respect for certainly some of the old athletes out there, and guys still performing into their 40s.
Because yourself, like,
more.
How much it takes to be, like we just spoke about this whole podcast, so to just do it in and out for 20 years and still live a life. So that it does, you have that correlation, that respect, don't you?
Very much so, very much so.
Finally, mate, the last thing I want to sort of ask you is about, it's not in cycling now, and I did hear this when I was doing a little bit of research with you, is spearfishing. Mate, we've got a thing in common. You love going spearing. I couldn't believe it. Tell me about your love for spearfishing.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess goes back to having grown up in Kenya as well, it would always go down to the beach once a year at least with the family, and that was always a big thing down there. Get a locally made. It didn't really look like a gun or a spear gun. It was kind of a piece of stick with an big elastic on it.
Hand spear, yeah, right.
That's I guess where it started out as a kid, and now living down in the south of France, Monaco, I tend to try and get out there as well.
Deep water or on the reef, just sort of
mainly around the reef.
Yeah, nice.
On the reef, not super deep. But in general, I love being on the water. I find the on and around water, it's calming for me. I feel like that's my meditation, if you like, just being in the sea. I've got two young kids as well. They love it as well. So any opportunity I get, I'm in the water with them.
Was it when you were around the water that you were chased by a hippo? How did that all come about?
I know that's definitely come from Impy as well. But yeah, fishing.
An actual hippo chased you?
Fishing as a teenager in the Masai Mara, on the border of the Masai Mara reserve in Kenya. I'd thrown a fishing line into this very muddy water. And I don't know if you've seen the stuff on National Geographic of the wildebeest crossing this big river and the crocodile sort of taking them. It's that river basically. So I was fishing in there. I thought I was on quite a safe point where there's a good drop off into the water. Nothing can really get me because there's a good little. I was elevated slightly.
When you say nothing can get me, what were you thinking that like?
A hippo or a croc. But I had about a meter and into deep water, so I was like, yeah, nothing can get me here. There's a bit of a beach off to the side here where something could come out, but I'll see it, and there's time for me to get going. I was sitting there fishing, and this thing comes up. The hippo comes up close to where I had my float. And I was like, whoa, that gave me a bit of a fright. Like, where did that come from? He went back down again, disappeared. Must have been 3 or 4 minutes later. I just hear this swirling water sound. I look to my right, and the thing's come out up the beach, like running at me with its mouth open, full charge.
Far out.
And these things can go like 40k an hour. They can run faster than a human. I just dropped everything, ran for my life up this embankment of the riverbed. It got pretty steep, and I just got up there as fast as I could and just grabbed onto like tree roots.
Far out.
And got as high as I could. Hippo followed me and got to maybe a couple meters below me. Figured out it couldn't come any further. Sort of did a few circles and then got back in the river. And I was just there hanging on for life, like looking down at this thing, because they kill a fair few people in Africa. They're one of the most.
How do they
dangerous.
Kill people? They just grab them with their mouth.
They're vicious. I mean, especially if they've got young around. They're very territorial. They're very defensive. The mothers are protective of their children, and they don't like people fishing in their river.
Chris, thank you very much for talking to me today, mate. It's been great to catch up with you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
Well, the legend, Chris Froome, what did you guys think? Did you find some stuff out about him that you didn't already know? I got a few tidbits of information from one of his good friends, Daryl Impey, and I tried to spice up the interview as well, but he was such a pro. He told those stories. They were great stories. I loved talking to him. As I've already said, I love talking to him in person. Big thanks goes out to Meg behind the scenes, who's doing all the nuts and bolts for Life in the Peloton this year. Will Jones, who's piecing these episodes together. Thanks, Will. And of course, you guys for listening. I love your feedback and I love hearing from you. I hope you guys have enjoyed the season so far. We're up and rolling and we've got some exciting podcasts coming up. I've changed the format of Talking Luft this year. There's going to be 12 Talking Lufts, one a month. So we're going to go right into Christmas and I want to spice them up. Next week, we've got an episode, Matthew Goss. So hang in for that one next week. We've got a Talking Luft coming for you. And until then, guys, cheers. The music in this episode was composed by Pete Shelley. Cheers, mate.